Caitlin Clark definitely had an effect on the WNBA. All the metrics went up. So we've seen all of our metrics from viewership, ticket sales, sponsorship, everything went up.
A toast to you, the WNBA.
For years, the WNBA's revenue targets were often viewed as unreachable benchmarks, figures designed more for optics than actual attainment. The 2020 collective bargaining agreement established massive financial goals that many considered unrealistic.
The Caitlin Clark stimulus pact just got approved by Congress today. A new CBA deal was reached, and all it takes is for a CC stimulus check to finally kick in.
Particularly as a global pandemic subsequently disrupted ticket sales and league operations. However, the league has now officially triggered revenue sharing for the first time in its history, surpassing the thresholds previously thought to be unattainable. Players across the league are now seeing the direct financial results of this growth.
Players that aren't even around anymore, they're getting a cut. It's a new day in the WNBA, and history generated enough revenue in 2025 to trigger revenue sharing with players for the first time.
Historically, the WNBA struggled to match the compensation levels seen in other professional sports, with top stars often earning less than entry-level players in the NBA. This dynamic shifted significantly in 2025. Attendance reached record highs and merchandise sales increased at an unprecedented rate. This surge in commercial interest was driven largely by the arrival of the Iowa standout, whose fan base brought a new level of economic engagement to the league. While some veteran players have been hesitant to credit a single individual for this shift, the financial data confirms a clear transformation in the league's market value. The financial details released by the Players' Union show that the league met the necessary benchmarks to trigger $16 million in shared revenue.
Teams will receive a pot of $8 million to be dispersed among players. For the first time in league history, the WNBA generated enough revenue in 2025 to trigger revenue sharing. Let's just give them a round of applause. Let's just give them a round of applause.
Half of that total is being reinvested into league marketing, while the remaining $8 million will be distributed among the players active during the 2025 season. Additionally, $9.25 million was generated through licensing agreements, including trading cards and jersey sales. To put this growth in perspective, the total licensing payout between 2016 and 2019 was only $280,000. This represents a move from marginal earnings to a multi-million-dollar windfall, though the achievement has been complicated by ongoing administrative friction. Despite the union's announcement regarding these revenue goals, the WNBA front office has remained largely silent. The league has declined to provide specific revenue figures or disclose the exact financial statements required to verify these totals.
So the league notified the Players' Union. The Players' Union submitted their proposal shortly after. So this information, though it's new to us, the players, the owners, they know about this. The owners stand on what their offer was, or should I say, they stood.
This lack of transparency has shifted the focus from a financial milestone to an internal investigation. While players point to sold-out arenas and high merchandise demand as evidence of success, the league appears reluctant to confirm the full scale of what has been termed the Clark effect. This secrecy is central to the current negotiations for a new collective bargaining agreement. The dispute involves a fundamental disagreement over how revenue is defined. The league has proposed giving players 70% of net revenue, which would allow the organization to deduct operating expenses such as private charter flights and arena upgrades before calculating player shares. The players are instead demanding 27.5% of gross revenue, which accounts for total income before any corporate expenses are subtracted. The players view the league's proposal as an attempt to have them subsidize their own professional amenities. The timeline for these negotiations is narrowing. The league recently announced that if a deal is not reached by March 10th, the 2026 season could be delayed or canceled. This standoff is no longer just about incremental raises. It is a debate over whether the players will be allowed to benefit from the league's expanding valuation. While owners claim the players' demands could lead to hundreds of millions in losses, those assertions are being compared to the rising value of individual franchises. The New York Liberty, for example, was recently valued at $450 million. As the March deadline approaches, the internal atmosphere has become increasingly strained. More than 50 players recently held a virtual meeting to discuss the standoff, signaling a unified refusal to accept the previous financial status quo. The triggering of the revenue-sharing clause has provided the players with the evidence they needed to argue that the WNBA is now a high-value commercial entity rather than a developmental project. Ultimately, this dispute centers on the future direction of the league. For decades, WNBA players were expected to accept limited compensation in exchange for the opportunity to play. Now, backed by a surge in popularity and a new generation of talent that has redefined the league's economics, the players possess significant leverage. They have proven their market value and the willingness of fans to invest in the product. As the March 10th deadline nears, the league must decide whether to integrate its players into this new era of prosperity or maintain a system that the players are no longer willing to accept. The financial tension currently defining the WNBA is rooted in a fundamental shift in how the league's media rights are valued. For the past decade, the WNBA's broadcast rights were largely bundled with the NBA's broader media packages, a move that provided stability but often capped the league's independent earning potential. The current agreement, valued at approximately $60 million annually, is now widely viewed as an undervaluation of the league's actual market draw. Negotiators for the Players' Union point to the television ratings of the 2024 and 2025 seasons as evidence that the league has outgrown its current contract. During the 2024 season, viewership for nationally televised games increased by over 140%, with several broadcasts surpassing 2 million viewers. This spike in audience engagement has fundamentally altered the baseline for the next round of media rights negotiations, which are expected to reach into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The core of the dispute involves how this projected influx of cash will be categorized. In the previous 2020 agreement, the revenue-sharing trigger was set at a level that required the league to exceed its internal growth projections by 20% before players saw a single dollar of shared profit. For years, that 20% buffer acted as a ceiling. Now that the ceiling has been breached, the Players' Union is seeking a model that more closely resembles the 50-50 split seen in the NBA. This would replace the current trigger system with a consistent percentage of total income. The league's reluctance to move toward a gross revenue model is tied to the high cost of its current expansion strategy. The WNBA is in the process of adding new franchises in Golden State, Toronto, and Portland. Each of these teams is paying an expansion fee reportedly upwards of $50 million per franchise. The union argues that these fees represent a massive capital injection that should benefit the current workforce, while the league maintains that expansion costs and initial operating losses for new teams justify a more conservative payout structure. The issue of operating expenses has become a primary point of contention, specifically regarding the league-wide implementation of charter flights. For years, players advocated for private travel to alleviate the physical toll of commercial flying and to improve security as the league's public profile grew. In 2024, the league finally committed to a full-season charter program at an estimated cost of $25 million per year. However, under the league's proposed net revenue model, the cost of these flights would be deducted from the revenue pool before player bonuses are calculated. The players view this as a circular financial arrangement where they are effectively paying for their own workplace safety and performance requirements. The union's stance is that essential business operations like travel and medical staffing should be considered fixed costs of the owners, not deductions from player earnings. Further complicating the negotiations is the prioritization rule, a policy introduced in the 2020 CBA that requires players to return from overseas leagues in time for the start of the WNBA season. Historically, WNBA players earned the bulk of their income playing in Europe or China during the winter. The prioritization rule was designed to ensure that the WNBA stars were present for the entire domestic season, but it effectively forced players to choose between the WNBA and more lucrative international contracts. With the league now seeing record revenues, the players are demanding salaries that make international play a choice rather than a financial necessity. The current maximum salary in the WNBA is approximately $242,000, a figure that many players argue is insufficient given the league's new $400 million valuations. The surge in merchandise sales has also exposed a lack of infrastructure in the league's licensing department. Between 2024 and 2025, sales of player-specific merchandise increased by over 500%. However, players have frequently reported shortages of jerseys and long delays in the availability of new apparel. The union is pushing for greater control over individual licensing rights, arguing that the league has been unable to keep pace with consumer demand. By shifting toward a gross revenue model, the players would gain a direct stake in every jersey, trading card, and digital asset sold, incentivizing the league to resolve its supply chain issues. The $9.25 million generated in licensing in the most recent fiscal year is seen by many analysts as only a fraction of the potential market value if the league had the inventory to meet the surge in interest. The debate over the March 10 deadline carries significant weight because of its proximity to the 2026 WNBA draft and the start of training camps. If a deal is not reached, the league faces the possibility of a lockout, which would be the first in its history. A work stoppage at this moment of peak popularity could have long-term consequences for corporate sponsorships. Current league partners, including major brands like Google, AT&T, and CarMax, have invested heavily in the league's growth over the last 3 years. A canceled or delayed season would likely trigger make-good clauses in these sponsorship contracts, costing the league millions in lost revenue and potentially damaging its relationship with the broader business community. The players' union is aware of this leverage and has remained firm in its demand for financial transparency. Transparency remains the most significant hurdle in the current standoff. The union has requested a detailed audit of the league's books to understand how expenses are being calculated. In professional sports, creative accounting can often make a profitable organization appear to be operating at a loss. By deducting depreciation on facilities, administrative overhead, and marketing costs, the league can report a net loss even as its cash flow and valuation increase. The players are demanding a shift to a basketball-related income model, similar to the one used by the NBA, which defines specific categories of income that must be shared regardless of the league's internal spending choices. The valuation of individual teams has further undermined the league's claim that it cannot afford the union's demands. In 2023 and 2024, several teams changed hands or sold minority stakes at record prices. The Seattle Storm was valued at $150 million, and more recently, the New York Liberty's valuation reached $450 million. These figures represent a massive return on investment for owners who purchased teams for a fraction of that price only a few years ago. The players argue that if the assets themselves are appreciating at this rate, the people responsible for that appreciation, the athletes, should see a proportional increase in their compensation. The owners' counter-argument is that these valuations are speculative and based on future potential rather than current cash on hand. They contend that the league is still in a growth phase that requires heavy reinvestment. The arrival of the 2024 rookie class acted as a catalyst for these issues, but it also highlighted the generational divide within the league. While the Clark effect brought in the revenue that triggered the current payout, veteran players have been instrumental in building the labor framework that allowed this moment to happen. There is a concerted effort within the union to ensure that the new CBA benefits all players, not just the top-tier stars who earn the most from endorsements. This includes a push for higher minimum salaries for bench players and improved retirement benefits for those who have spent a decade or more in the league. The $16 million in shared revenue is a significant milestone, but when split across the entire player pool, it highlights how much work remains to be done to achieve a sustainable professional wage across the board. Another factor in the negotiations is the league's hard cap system. Currently, WNBA teams have very little flexibility to sign multiple high-priced stars, which has led to super team formations where players take sub-maximum salaries to play together in major markets like New York or Las Vegas. The union is advocating for a soft cap with a luxury tax, similar to the NBA, which would allow owners who are willing to spend more on their roster to do so. This would increase the total pool of money available to players and allow teams to retain their homegrown talent more easily. The league has resisted this change, citing a desire to maintain competitive balance, though the union argues that this is simply a mechanism to keep total labor costs depressed. As the deadline approaches, the role of the NBA in these negotiations remains a point of interest. This relationship provides a safety net, but it also means that the WNBA's financial decisions are often influenced by the NBA's broader corporate goals. Some players have expressed a desire for the WNBA to move toward full independence, believing that the league's current growth justifies a standalone business model that is not subject to the NBA's oversight. This would allow the WNBA to negotiate its own media deals and sponsorship packages without having to coordinate with the men's league, potentially leading to a more accurate market valuation. The virtual call involving more than 50 players in early 2026 served as a show of force, intended to signal to the league that the union is prepared for a prolonged dispute. The players have spent the last 2 years educating themselves on the intricacies of the league's financial structure, and they are no longer willing to accept top-line figures without seeing the underlying data. The demand for 27.5% of gross revenue is not just a number, it is a move toward a partnership model. The players are essentially asking to be treated as stakeholders rather than just employees. The outcome of these negotiations will determine the trajectory of the league for the next decade. If the players succeed in securing a gross revenue split, it will set a new standard for women's professional sports globally. It would mark the end of the charity model of women's athletics and the beginning of a truly commercial era. However, if the league holds firm and the players are forced to accept another net revenue deal, the frustration within the locker rooms could lead to a significant talent drain, with players seeking more lucrative opportunities in emerging leagues or international markets. The March 10th deadline is not just a date on a calendar, it is the point at which the league's rhetoric about investing in women will be put to the test. For years, the WNBA has marketed itself as a progressive organization dedicated to the empowerment of its athletes. The current contract dispute has revealed the limits of that marketing. When faced with the actual financial growth they have long sought, the league's leadership has responded with the same cost-cutting measures and lack of transparency typical of traditional corporate entities. The players are now holding the league accountable to its own branding. The $16 million that was recently triggered is only the beginning of what is expected to be a period of intense financial reorganization. As the league expands and the new media rights deal takes effect, the amount of money flowing into the WNBA will reach levels that were unimaginable during the 2020 negotiations. The question is no longer whether the money exists, but how it will be divided. The players have already done the work of bringing the fans into the arenas and the viewers to the screens, transformed the league's economic reality. Now, they are waiting to see if the league's governing structure will evolve to reflect that new reality. In the final weeks leading up to the deadline, the focus remains on the specific language of the proposed agreement. The union is looking for ironclad guarantees regarding financial reporting and a clear definition of what constitutes basketball-related income. They are also seeking improvements in quality of life areas, such as year-round access to team training facilities and better health insurance for retired players. These are the types of benefits that are standard in the NBA but have remained elusive in the WNBA due to the league's historically tight margins. The 2026 season stands at a crossroads. The momentum from the previous 2 years has put the WNBA in a position of unprecedented strength, but that strength is being tested by internal division. The stimulus provided by the new wave of talent has created a high-stakes environment where the old rules of the league no longer apply. The impossible benchmarks have been hit, the revenue has been shared, and the value of the franchises has reached record heights. All that remains is for the two sides to agree on a path forward that recognizes the league is no longer a small-scale operation, but a major player in the global sports economy. The standoff is a reminder that growth often brings as much friction as it does opportunity. The WNBA is experiencing the growing pains of a league moving from the periphery of the sports world to the center. The financial figures being discussed, $16 million in sharing, $450 million in valuation, hundreds of millions in media rights are the markers of a successful business. But a business can only function if its most essential assets feel they are being compensated fairly. As the clock runs down toward March 10th, the players have made it clear. They know what they are worth, and they are no longer willing to wait for the league to catch up.